Good old My Hero Academia. The show that I'm probably off thinking about in my spare time way too much. There are so many different aspects of the show I love to break down, from the characters to the world building to just dumb shit like how good their porn industry would be. But that aside, with how much time I actually spend thinking about this show, sometimes I come across really unusual realizations like unexplored plot devices, quirks that are secretly god tier, and of course, some really good ways to exploit the world's rules and laws. So today, for fun mostly, I wanted to take the time to break down My Hero Academia's ultimate designer baby, Shoto Todoroki. More specifically, his quirk, half hot, half cold, and really explore just how overpowered this thing could be. And may I say, after doing some research, if Todoroki took up the notes I'm about to give him, this man would be unstoppable. Just a heads up before we go on, all of this is speculation, none of it is pulled from the manga. I may reference the manga in some of my arguments, but I promise I won't spoil a thing. So let's hop in and exploit the shit out of Todoroki's quirk. So let's start by breaking down what exactly half hot, half cold is. Half hot, half cold is an extremely rare case of two quirks manifesting in a user. And yes, I know they have gone back and forth as to whether or not technically Todoroki's quirk is one quirk or two quirks, but from what I've read most recently, according to the manga, Todoroki's quirk is technically considered two separate quirks, with Todoroki even stating it. And from what I can tell, although it's rare, it's not impossible for some people to manifest two quirks naturally. As from the context clues given, we can infer that Todoroki is not the only case of this. So whether or not you agree with me, we can both agree that the My Hero manga and anime haven't been very consistent with one decision or another. So for the sake of simplicity for this video, Shoto Todoroki has two quirks. So let's break those down. Frankly, the design of Todoroki's quirk is quite simple. Half of his body is able to emit flames while the other half is able to create ice. So first, let's establish a baseline of sorts. We need to start by discussing what are some of the applications he's done with his quirk so far. So let's begin with his half ice quirk. First, he's able to create massive walls of ice. We've seen him do this on multiple occasions with relative ease, showing that he has quite a bit of raw power when it comes to using his ice quirk. Another skill he's mastered is riding his ice on the ground like a wave. Once again, it's a very useful skill and gives him a bit of mid-range mobility. But it does have its drawbacks. We never really see him get high off of the ground. The highest we see him reach is in the fight against Stain, where he's able to get a foothold on the buildings. And also with this technique, his overall speed seems limited, often being slower than some of the faster quirk users in the show, like Ida and Yorashi. The wind guy, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry. American, happens. Which is why I'm saying he has mid-range mobility. Another unique skill we see from Todoroki is ranged precision casting of his ice. He's only done it in a few situations, but it does seem like Todoroki doesn't have to be directly touching something to make ice appear on it. A good example being his fight against Ida in the school sports festival arc. As for half hot, we have significantly less information on this quirk. Once again, it appears as though Todoroki is able to cast flames from half of his body. And at the very least, similar to his walls of ice, he seems to have a lot of raw power. He's able to create large walls of flames along with mid-range pillars of flames. We don't really see him using any precision-based flame skills yet, but I believe it's possible with proper training. Okay, so now we have a baseline for the skills Todoroki has with his quirks. We know what his quirks are and roughly what he is capable of doing. So let's finally talk about some ways we can improve his combat abilities. And before we dive into this, can I just say, I am so excited to show you guys just how broken Todoroki's quirk can be. But right before we get into that, I have one last final question I have to ask. Is Todoroki capable of dual casting his quirks? In other words, activating both his fire quirk and his ice quirk at the exact same time. And from what I can tell, yeah, it seems like he's perfectly capable of doing just that. Granted, he's only ever done it once in his fight against Midoriya, but yeah, let's talk about a little something called steam. I know, you have all the power of fire and ice and you want to talk about steam? Goddamn right I do. We've seen Todoroki create steam countless times during the show. Basically, anytime he's done using his ice quirk, he melts away the ice and we get to see a bit of steam. But that steam is a secret power he has yet to unlock. So let me begin by explaining what makes steam so overpowered. When you think of steam, you're probably thinking of water being heated and turned into steam. But what you may not have known is that ice can be instantly converted to steam through a process known as sublimation. Basically, you just need a boatload of heat and apply it to the ice and you can convert it directly to steam. And hey, guess what Todoroki can do? So, time for the important question. Why bother? Well, it's all about volume. Todoroki can create massive walls of ice, and if he converts that ice to water, he gets about a 90% return ratio, losing volume. Granted, that's mostly because water is weird. Most solids, when converted to liquid, gain volume. However, the ratio of volume from ice to steam is roughly 1,500 times the volume. So to put that into perspective, a single 1 square inch ice cube converts to 125 square feet or 38 square meters of steam. And with the process of sublimation being a rather violent one because of the rapid expansion in volume, congratulations Todoroki, you now have the power to cast steam-based shock waves. Now, obviously, Todoroki can't control the steam himself, but controlling the amount of ice and heat applied to the reaction is basically the same thing. This kind of ability would be fantastic in a hero-based world. Obviously, you don't have to use it to create shockwaves. Steam could be a way to create smoke screens to capture villains, or even once you get good enough, as a way of propulsion similar to Bakugo. You would probably need to master jumping on compressed steam, similar to Gran Torino and compressed air. This would increase Todoroki's mobility exponentially. Not to mention, if you come across a villain immune to ice and that you can't use fire on because, well, you might kill them, steam is a solid alternative. Steam would add a ton of mobility, a ridiculous amount of firepower, and a decent bit of utility to Todoroki's already very powerful kit. But there are still some other alternative techniques that could take Todoroki to the next level. So we talked about dual casting earlier, which is more or less a confirmed thing that Todoroki can do. So now let's talk about something that is unconfirmed. Simultaneous casting of a single quirk. In other words, the ability to cast a single quirk multiple times at the exact same time. Similar to how Bakugo can do multiple explosions at the same time, my theory is that with enough training, Todoroki could eventually be able to cast 2 separate flame trails at the same time, or 2 ice walls at the same time. With simultaneous casting, that means he's able to cast steam and ice, or steam and fire. In which case, that opens a world of possibilities with steam style. Sorry, goddammit, I know it's a lame name, but it's what I could think of at the time. Basically, with steam style, we can open up an entirely new set of attacks for Todoroki. For instance, I think one of the biggest problems with Todoroki is that he is strictly a mid-range fighter. By the way, I know he's called a long-range fighter in the UA Sports Festival arc, but I'm gonna call bullshit on that. He's definitely a mid-range fighter, which is usually defined as a range between 10 to 150 feet, which Todoroki falls squarely into. Anyway, back to my point. Unlike Midoriya and Bakugo, who are both close and mid-range fighters, Todoroki is naturally very weak at close range. But with steam style, we can convert Todoroki into both a mid-range and a true long-range fighter. For instance, with simultaneous casting, Todoroki can create what are basically ice spears and launch them with steam. In other words, he can use that technique as a primary attack method to keep close-range opponents, his natural enemies, away. And of course, with steam style, he can enhance the impact of his flames. Obviously, it won't increase the heat of his flames, but for enemies who are slippery, well, it won't be so easy to outrun his flames. So yeah, this was kind of my point when I was making my video about Bakugo being the next #1 hero. Bakugo and Midoriya both think very creatively with their quirks. I mean, Bakugo freaking flies, and Midoriya already uses shockwaves. Meanwhile, Todoroki is like, I guess I'll just make my flames hotter. Which isn't a bad idea if you're a villain like Dabi and you just want to incinerate people. But yeah, I think if he just used steam style, his power would grow exponentially. But I don't know, it does kind of fit Todoroki's character of him being a bit of a simpleton. I'm sorry, I don't mean that in an offensive way. I love that boy, but damn, he's just not the brightest bulb in the bunch. By the way, if you guys are new here, please make sure you guys subscribe. We're so close to 90,000 subs. I just want to hit 90k subs. But yeah, and let me know if you guys like this style of video. Like I said, I feel like I've come up with way too many exploits for My Hero Academia, but that's just me. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We also have a Discord that's been popping for a while. If you guys want to come hang out, talk about My Hero Academia, talk about anime, talk about manga. I know, we have manga on there. Feel free to come check us out. We'll have a link in the description. Either way, a huge thank you to my patrons. You guys are my heroes. Please make sure you guys share, like, comment, and subscribe. This is Manime. Make sure you guys say man and go watch that goddamned anime.